Remarkable growth and investment potential in both China and Africa makes for a dynamic partnership in global economics. Whether Africa and China can have a win-win partnership is another matter altogether. Our producer Buntu Williams went to find out at the China-Africa Business Forum that just concluded here in Johannesburg.
The general belief is that the Chinese dragon has invaded the African jungle. Armed to the teeth, it boasts flying abilities, fire-breathing tricks, and immeasurable strength. But is this perception the consensus on Beijing?
There is a perception in Africa seeing Chinese investing or operating in this continent, because mainly Chinese investments in Africa are related to resources such as oil, mining, copper, coal. And today it happens that we see more Chinese investments in services, which means that there is a diversification in Chinese investments and operation in Africa.
Economies and nations compete. Self-interest drive their actions, drive the plans, drive the implementation. And that will not change. China is competing very aggressively with the world, but it's complicated. Being part of a formation such as BRICS allow for the developing world to do more, to integrate more, and find opportunity and collaboration more easily. But that does not detract from the fact that for the rest of time, all these countries compete. The question is, how can policymakers, CEOs, boards of companies use these constructs like BRICS, the next 11 other groupings, to make their businesses or their organizations compete more effectively. China is a $6 trillion economy. In BRICS alone, the next biggest economy is a $2 trillion, and then after the $1.5 trillion economy, with South Africa coming in at less than 400 billion. So they're very different. They will be able to compete in different areas and in different ways. They're not the same, and that we have to accept. But we must continue to look for the opportunity and leverage BRICS to our advantage as a small economy in the case of South Africa, in terms of how that then relates to our positioning in Africa and our positioning on the global stage.
Seeing that Africa is indeed in need of Chinese investment, how can the continent play to a win-win position in its relations with China?
We're making progress. I think first of all, our leaders, our business leaders, government leaders are looking at the world differently. We're seeing what are the hotspots, what are the areas of concentration for capital, where capital will flow from, where markets are, where markets will grow, where we need to engage, whether it be to export, whether it be to attract capital, whether it be to build supply chains, whether it be in high-end goods and value-added industries, whether it be in the resources. So I think that's the first step, and I think we are making progress. But have we got it exactly right? Not yet.
Different countries have different priorities. So a very poor country, for example South Sudan, which now recently became independent with almost no infrastructure, no industry, they will have very, very different priorities and very, very different modus operandi from a country like South Africa that has an almost a first world infrastructure and legal framework. So one could have principles and one should promote certain minimum levels of conduct. But I think in terms of creating investment policies, there's still a very, very long way to go before African countries are united on that issue.
And this is an evolution. This is where we must make sure that when investors, whether they be Chinese or Asian or any international investor, when they do due diligence in buying equity, in buying into a project, in making co-investments in South Africa relative to elsewhere in Africa, that we seem competitive, that we seem open for business, that we have a playing field that makes sense, that we have the regulations in place, that we send confidence signals rather than signals of confusion.
There is consensus, however, that Chinese investment can actually enhance local business and corporations while enhancing a country's social agenda.
What Africans think about Chinese investment in those sectors like mining, oil, copper, it's something. I mean, it's like they're taking resources from Africa back to China. But if you look at the telecom industry, there is no such thing that happens. I mean, because the only thing that happens, it's like they're investing in services in Africa to help and develop, services businesses in this continent. In terms of telecom, Huawei and ZTE are here to help African local network providers to build equipment and to widen their network coverage. And maybe later on they will even focus on broadband internet.
So the George Orwell dictum still holds true. In the jungle, some animals are just more equal than others.
Some small players can be competitive, that we've seen, and some very large players can sometimes act slowly. But you know, if all the big players are acting at the top of the game, it would make it very hard for the small players if they act at the bottom of the game all the time. That's not how the world works. It's about people, it's about awareness, it's about CEOs thinking differently, it's about education, it's about information management. And I think that's where a smaller player can focus on the right niche areas, can be more proactive, can be quicker to react, and can be more strategic. And that in a way then levels the playing field somewhat in favor of those that are not merely large, but those that act at the top of their game.